Hey everyone, in this video we are directly going to compare the brand new MSI CLAW against the ASUS ROG Ally in a couple of games. For this test we'll be using the Core Ultra 7 version of the MSI CLAW and the Z1 Extreme version of the ROG Ally.
This is Hubwood. For
the ROG Ally I was setting the VRAM to 5GB and testing the handheld both at its highest 30W setting and the popular 15W mode, which most people use when the Ally isn't plugged in. For the MSI CLAW, I was also using its highest setting, which officially is 40W when plugged in and 35W when unplugged. But in reality, the iGPU and CPU mostly use around 35W anyways, and I was also testing it on its lowest possible wattage, which is 20W in this case. Now, I was choosing these settings because they are most realistic to be used by gamers out there, and testing both devices at all wattages just takes too much time for my possibilities. Keep in mind that it's not yet possible to manually set the VRAM size for the MSI CLAW. I was of course using the newest available BIOS and driver versions for both handhelds. And one note in advance, I also wanted to include Baldur's Gate 3 and The Last of Us, but both games have been unplayable on the MSI CLAW yet due to crashes. For The Last of Us, I was not able to load any save game on the CLAW, and Baldur's Gate 3 just kept crashing after a few minutes of playing the game in Act 3. Please let me know if you face the same issues, in case you've been bold enough to get one of these. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're interested in my upcoming comparison of the Core Ultra 5 versus the Core Ultra 7 version of the MSI CLAW. It came to my ear that the Core Ultra 5 version seems to be performing a bit better in some games yet. And the power distribution between the CPU and the iGPU could be an issue here as well. To be fair, we must keep in mind that the ROG Ally did get a huge amount of updates and fixes so far, and didn't run as good in the beginning as well, and the MSI CLAW has just been released the other week. But now, without further ado, let's take a look at the benchmarks. For Cyberpunk 2077, I was testing both medium and low settings with activated FSR on performance for the Ally and XESS on performance for the MSI CLAW, and in this case I was using the integrated benchmark to do so. And the MSI CLAW is getting absolutely destroyed by the Ally here. Using the handheld's maximum wattage at medium settings, the Ally is getting a whopping 79% more FPS than the CLAW with 52/29 FPS. And the 1% lows are just devastating for the MSI handheld in this title in all scenarios, which will most likely be addressed with further driver updates. Especially on the lower wattage settings, the game is basically unplayable for the MSI CLAW no matter the setting. It's just stuttering too hard despite the already low average FPS. For Apex Legends, I was using the training area with a predefined parkour to ensure I could directly compare the same situation over and over again. In this case, I was only testing the lowest settings at 1080p. Both handhelds managed to surpass the 60 FPS border no matter the wattage in this case. For the higher wattage settings, the ROG Ally is around 26% faster despite the lower wattage, while the CLAW manages to get decent frame rates and decent 1% lows nevertheless, while it struggles with sad 1% lows when using the 20W setting. For Fortnite, I was testing the game at 1080p using the game's performance mode and the lowest possible settings within that mode. I was playing a full match and used the replay of it to benchmark both handhelds. The MSI CLAW was surprisingly close to the ROG Ally in this game on the higher wattage preset, and both handhelds managed to fully utilize their 120Hz screens by hitting an average of 120 FPS, which is always nice to see. The Ally was only around 5% ahead on the high wattage settings. That is most likely because on these low settings the CPU becomes a stronger bottleneck, and the Core Ultra 7 is a very strong mobile CPU indeed, so maybe with future updates MSI could even take the lead in this scenario if the game is played with such low settings. In Hogwarts Legacy, I was using my usual benchmark run to the Forbidden Forest at 1080p with FSR set to performance both on medium and low settings. At the higher wattages, the ROG Ally beats the CLAW by around 38% on the medium and 20% on the low preset, with similarly good 1% lows. On the lower wattages, the MSI CLAW was surprisingly close to the Ally's performance, while the MSI CLAW struggled with stuttering on the medium preset using 20 watt. But keep in mind that the Ally would even be further ahead if it was set to 20 watt accordingly. And of course, this higher wattage kinda equalizes the bigger battery capacity the MSI CLAW comes with. For Red Dead Redemption 2, I was using the integrated benchmark at 1080p with FSR and performance while running the game utilizing the Vulkan API. At the highest wattage on medium settings, the Ally was around 22% ahead, while this time the MSI CLAW is actually able to take the lead on the lower wattages by around 8% on the medium and 12% on the low preset. Again, the ROG Ally would of course perform better at 20 watt. The 1% lows seem to be okay for both devices except for the MSI CLAW when I was using the highest wattage and the lowest settings, which could be a measurement error though. However, only the ROG Ally seems to be able to hit more than 60 FPS on average while using low settings at its highest wattage in this case. For Shadow of the Tomb Raider, I was once more using the integrated benchmark tool with the DirectX 12 API at 1080p, while both handhelds haven't been able to get 60 FPS on average in that case. However, the ROG Ally had a small lead in all scenarios, around 13% when using the highest wattage at the medium preset to only 2 to 3% when I was testing the lowest preset at the handheld's lower wattages. Once more, the MSI CLAW did have stutter issues shown by the bad 1% lows at its lowest power setting. Keep in mind that in all games it would certainly make a lot of sense to cap the FPS at any number, since both handhelds do have a variable refresh rate display to ensure more stability while still preventing screen tearing and giving out a smooth image. In Call of Duty Warzone, I was playing a regular Battle Royale match for around 5 to 10 minutes for each test at 1080p with FSR and performance using the game's minimal graphics preset. Here, the ROG Ally destroyed the MSI CLAW with a lead of 51% using the highest wattages, while both handhelds struggle with the 1% lows, which means there is some noticeable stuttering once in a while. So further lowering the resolution in combination with an FPS cap could be a good decision in that case. On the 15 watt and 20 watt modes, the Ally still leads with 39% over the MSI CLAW, while 38 FPS aren't really playable in such a title for most gamers out there. In Starfield, I was using my usual benchmark run through the first bigger city in the game at 1080p with FSR 3, frame generation and VSR activated. Once again, the Ally takes a big lead at the higher wattages with 56 over 33 FPS on the medium settings and 67 over 39 FPS on the low preset, resulting in an advantage of a whopping 71%. MSI and Intel will most likely give us some improvement here in the future with driver updates if they want to stay in the game. Though on the lower wattage modes, the lead shrinks while the MSI CLAW is once more plagued by stuttering and super bad 1% lows. I have to point out that using frame generation on such low FPS leads to a noticeably bad input lag, which makes the game kinda unplayable on both devices. For Forza Horizon 5, I was once more using the game's integrated benchmark run at 1080p with FSR turned off. And again, especially at the higher wattages, the Ally takes the clear lead with 66 over 44 FPS at the medium preset and 76 over 55 FPS at the low preset. Important, not the very low preset, which results in a difference of 38%. And once more, the difference between both handhelds shrinks at the lower wattage modes, where at 15 watt and 20 watt, using the low preset, the Ally achieved 53 over 48 FPS on the CLAW, resulting in a difference of now only 10%. And last but not least, I fired up the integrated benchmark for Far Cry 6 at 1080p with FSR turned off, and this time the difference between the two wasn't that big. I have to point out that without FSR, none of these two was able to get 60 FPS on average, with a maximum of 51 FPS for the Ally using the low preset at the 30 watt profile over 43 FPS on the CLAW's 40 watt mode, a difference of 18%. and now only a tiny difference of only 5% when both handhelds ran at lower wattages and the low preset. And again, we see severe stutter issues for the MSI CLAW here and there. I am fully aware that the results could differ a bit on lower resolutions, especially if FSR was turned off, but it's just impossible for me to repeat all of these tests in multiple resolutions in time, as just these now tested benchmarks and the evaluation took days to complete. And that's all for today. As expected, MSI and Intel most certainly have a lot of work to do improving the performance of the ARC iGPU within the Core Ultra 7 and probably also the Core Ultra 5 if they want to compete with AMD and ASUS in this market. Especially considering the much higher price the MSI CLAW has until today. But both these factors can of course change for the better in the future. So we'll have to wait and see. But all of this won't change the other major issue I had with the MSI CLAW, for which you can find out more in my dedicated review if you'd like to watch that next. So thanks for watching, see you next time, bye bye and tschüss.